Okay, hello again. We are going to be talking about interviewing in this video, and asking the questions is the chapter in your textbook, Sports Journalism, an Introduction to Reporting and Writing, Stouffer, Schaefer, and Rosenthal. Hope you have a copy of the book. But a lot of what I talk about here also will just be based on my own point of view and my own experiences in this, which are fairly considerable. Now, interviews are conducted to bring out the personality of the athlete or the coach. Fans would like to know them. What are they like? So the purpose of the interview is not very often to actually elicit factual information. It's to bring out the personality of the athlete or the coach. And very often, more often than not, in a sports interview, you are trying to get sound bites, short little clips that can be used on television or radio or streaming programs, a podcast, what have you. You're trying to get the thoughts and reflections of the athletes and coaches on a game that just ended, or maybe it's a game that is coming up. And so again, the interview is only rarely about actually unearthing factual information. So much factual information, especially in sports, is available quite easily through statistics and what have you. So the approach of the broadcast sports interview may often be to prompt the athlete to talk about a given subject rather than to ask questions as such. And there are people who disagree with that, and I'm going to come to that point in a moment. In this situation, you don't even need to try to record your own questions because they're not likely going to be used on the air. It's only what the athlete or the coach has to say. It's all about the soundbite. Therefore, a technique that works well, in my opinion, and you do see this a lot, is tell me about. So the reporter says to the athlete, tell me about the game-winning base hit in the bottom of the ninth inning, or talk about. And this way you point the athlete or coach in the direction you want him or her to go, and they go that way. We want to keep questions short anyway. We don't want long-winded questions. You don't want to ask questions that can be answered yes or no, which is one reason tell me about is good. Now, there are people, some commentators on media, who are critical of this approach, and they say you should always ask a question. And questions are good. I think sometimes it's awkward to put something into the form of a question. If you've ever watched the television program Jeopardy, the game show, you know that it's a little bit awkward sometimes to phrase something as a question. So I don't have a problem with tell me about, especially now I will say, here we're talking about a particular situation, post-game locker room interview where you're attempting to get sound bites. If it's a sit-down type interview, and we'll talk about that later, studio interview, where the interview is going to be televised or broadcast in its entirety, then that's another matter. But so I'm talking about here the locker room type situation. Here's a clip of a locker room interview with a player with the Orlando Magic, I believe, and we'll watch a few moments of this.
It's big time, disrupt the rhythm. Sims plays great for us, but he's not a point guard. We put him in a situation that he's not used to be in, so it's tough on him. But it's tough.
Every season has adversity now. I mean, it's gone well up to this point. Now you're going to fight through this, right?
Yeah, guys. I mean, it's game 10. Just like we weren't too high when we had a 6-2 start, we're not going to get too low because we lost by 20. It's a good reminder that we have a long way to go. The Celtics are playing really, really well, and we're just not good enough yet to really beat this team.
And what's your strategy takeaway that you're bringing into Wednesday's game? Tonight's game.
The strategy?
Yeah, what's your biggest takeaway that you're bringing into Wednesday's game?
For tonight, I think is playing more physical. The Celtics outplayed us, man. They played more physical. They were the aggressor all night on offense and defense. So
There, make some comments on that. You see the reporters gathered around the athlete. Some of them are still taking notes. I think that's good. You see all the microphones or the recording devices. In some cases, it's nothing but a cell phone that are thrust somewhat in his face. We'll talk about that aspect of it as well. The first person who spoke to him he didn't say tell me about, but he kind of made a statement that prompted the athlete to go in the direction he wanted him to go. You did see something we'll talk about is eye contact. The reporter was making eye contact with the athlete, which lets the athlete know that the reporter is interested in what he has to say. The young woman had a question about, I think she asked, what is your takeaway from this game and how will it affect your strategy in the next game? I think that was the question. So questions are good. But again, here in this situation, which is a very common situation, what everybody's concerned about is the sound bite. It's just his voice. And you notice they did not pull the microphones back to their own face to record their question because they're not going to use that. They're just going to use his voice. Listen to what the person you're interviewing says. He or she may answer a question that you were going to ask, or they may say something unexpected that deserves a follow-up question. If they answer a question that you were going to ask, and then you go ahead and ask the question, well, you look silly, you look foolish, because he just told you that, right? But what is more important, they may say something that you didn't expect them to say, and that brings up a different question than what you were going to ask, but it's a better question under the circumstances. But if you're not listening to what they're saying, then you miss that. So, and there's a lot of things going through your mind when you're doing this. So it's harder than it sounds to stay focused on what they're saying and to listen. But it's important to listen to what they have to say. Be knowledgeable of the game, the team, and the player. If you're covering a particular game, you want to actually pay attention to the game. Take note of key plays or trends. Might have been, if we're talking about football, a blocked punt, an unusual number of penalties, and then plan to ask about those, to direct the player or coach to talk about those. If you're interviewing a player or a coach prior to an upcoming game, so we talked about the advanced story in the first outline and video that we had. You want to familiarize yourself with what happened in the most recent game and what challenges the upcoming team, the opposing team, will pose. And again, we've talked about how much information is available on team web pages and even for high school teams. There's a website called Max Preps for high school sports, and it covers teams all over the country. You can almost literally look up any high school team. Now, the teams provide a lot of that information. Some teams provide more information than others, but there's a good deal of information there. So the bottom line, do your homework. Be prepared with intelligent questions. Again, always be thinking about what does the audience want to know? What do the people who read my articles, listen to my broadcast, what would they want to know? Immediately after a game, your first question may simply be, Coach, your thoughts on the game. And just let him go where he wants to go, or her. Doesn't have to be a probing, deep question, just kind of prompt them to, and then whatever is at the front of their mind is what will come out, and that usually will be pretty good. Let him or her go where they want to go. And then you might follow up with a particular thing. Tell me about the decision to pitch to Pujols in the 8th inning. Let us say that Luis Pujols got the game-winning hit, could have walked him, but pitched to him. But that saying, tell me about the decision, is not judgmental. It's not saying, why did you make that decision, which might be irritating, and that's not necessarily bad, but by and large my approach is not to be irritating, but it prompts them to go in the direction of a particular play that you want them to comment on. Again, we've talked about listen to their answers. Now another situation other than the locker room interview, and that happens mostly in pro sports. In college sports, you have more so the post-game news conference, where they bring the coaches and athletes out to a room outside of the locker room, and then the media are gathered there, and they sit at a table, and then they receive questions. So I have a video here of A&M Commerce head football coach David Bailiff and players Elijah Earls and Miklo Smalls. This was after a playoff game victory in 2019 at Colorado School of Mines.
Coach David Bailiff on the left, defensive end, Elijah Earls on the right, quarterback Nicholas Smalls will start. Coach, comments on the game overall, playoff atmosphere, whole thing.
Yeah, you know what an amazing experience. Too, you saw the pictures, the video of what this community did just to get this stadium ready to go. You know, great job to Golden and great job to the Ore Digger fans for coming out with that type of community support. What a picturesque stadium. You know, it was gorgeous. What a classy football team too. And you want to talk about young men that play hard. That's the hardest playing team we've played all year. And so my hat's off to their staff. What an amazing game that was today. As far as we go, you know what, God, we had to earn it. You know, nothing came easy today. First drive, Miklo drove us down there, had to settle for what we thought would be a field goal. It got blocked. You know, and to come in here at halftime 7-3, and then end up winning 23-3. But the defensive effort was just unbelievable. I thought the defense was just swarming. I know we tied a playoff record. We had 10 sacks today and held those guys to 86 yards. And I know we had over 400 total yards of offense. And
Going to pause it there. So he's given, without really being prompted at all, I think it may have been the first words you heard on there was probably from Josh Mank, our sports information director, and just sort of addressing the media and inviting their questions and introducing the coach and the players, and he just kind of took off and told you a lot of what you would want to know anyway, and then other questions will be asked by members of the media who are there. That's typically a fairly relaxed situation, much more so than the locker room interview gathered around the player, which depends on the situation, but can be fairly tense. And this, what you just saw, is more typical of college sports, more likely what you would encounter in the kinds of things that you would be involved in while you're a student and maybe your first job or two. So that is a pretty typical situation. Okay, I'm going to stop this at that point and to not let it go on so long, and we'll do this in two parts. And so there will be a second part to this discussion about interviewing for sports media. Thanks, and we'll see you next time.